You'd be surprised. Like, I've worked with organizations where there's actually no set target. I'm like, how does anybody know which way is up here?
Hey there, and welcome to a brand new episode of Delivering Marketing Joy. I'm your host, Kirby Hassman, and joining me today is a brand new rock star from all the way across the sea. I really appreciate him taking the time and staying up late for me. He's a fractional CMO, he's a CRO, he's a marketing advisor. Andy Culligan, thanks so much for joining me.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Kirby.
Absolutely. So, one of the things I've looked into you was you're a marketing person that also understands sales. And I'm always fascinated by the divide in some organizations between marketing and sales. So can you talk about aligning the two and how you can do that in order to grow?
Yeah, I think, so this is the second podcast I've been on today, actually, where I've spoken about this in particular. In that and their question to me was like, okay, what's the number one thing that you can do to get marketing and sales alignment? And the answer is that both of them talk to one another. It starts with actually communicating, right?
Crazy.
Because we went around the houses talking about all different techniques and things that you can do, but actually the main thing is making sure that you have an open line of communications that's happening on a regular cadence. If that's not happening, then you're not going to see alignment. And then on top of that, you need to make sure that that's being pushed from the marketing side. That's my experience with it. Marketers don't like to hear that, but it is what it is. My experience is that if you really want to get close to sellers, you need to push it, because they're going to be focused on closing and opening new deals, right? And everything else, it comes as a secondary thing. But in order for your marketing to be successful, you're going to need to lean on that sales team. So marketers, focus on opening those lines of communications with your sales team. Regular cadence.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I once heard where the leadership of sales and the leadership of marketing would switch hats, like one would be in charge of the other every 6 months or something like that. And I was like, "Ooh, that's an interesting concept too," because I do think it's like they think that they're not, you guys should be on the same team. So I think that's good advice by you. Is just to communicate. Yeah. So look, we all need revenue, right? So in your roles that you've been in, do you have any proven strategies that help companies create growth?
Sure. So it really depends on what their model is. I work mostly in, all of the business I work with is in SaaS, the majority of which is in high ticket SaaS, but I also work with high volume SaaS. So it depends on the model. So I'll start with high ticket SaaS. I think in the high ticket SaaS piece, it's about making sure that you're getting as much as you possibly can out of your existing marketing and sales teams. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, do they have set targets? Do they know what they're aiming for? Now, everybody says, of course, sales has targets. You'd be surprised. I've worked with organizations where there's actually no set target. I'm like, how does anybody know which way is up here? Yeah. So I'd be trying to get as granular as possible on targets, looking at different regions for growth. So where do you plan to grow within the next 6 to 9 to 12 months? Where do you see emerging markets? How can you go dig into those markets? How can you put people on those markets and get them focused on that, right? And that goes across so in my world where I'm operating in SaaS, you'd typically have a pairing between account executives and SDRs. So if you want to go AEs, account executives, you make sure that they're focused on the right regions and they have a good specific target set for that specific region based on where the growth potential is. Then if you go and look at SDRs, how are SDRs then feeding into that? Right, the SDR team should then be looking to book meetings with key accounts within those specific areas. What does that mean? It means surrounding those specific key accounts with key messaging via email, phone, LinkedIn, right? People always say, oh no, you need to go super personalized because that's the only way to do it. It's like, you do that later, but you define your account list first, get 6 to 10 people in your buying committee, make sure that those 6 to 10 people are being surrounded with messaging from a person. That's an SDR, right? Those SDRs are then helping AEs book meetings, right? On top of that, the marketing team then also have that list of accounts for those specific regions, and marketing are doing air cover to help both the SDRs get traction in those accounts and the AEs then, once they get traction in those accounts, to get quicker deals closed, right? So what are you doing from a marketing perspective? You're maybe looking at the industries that you're going after. So the industries that we're going after, how can we create some case studies with existing business that we already do in similar markets? How can we create something, a message with an existing company, a case study to show the success that we've seen? Then go push that in front of that specific market. Are there events that are taking place in that specific market, which are good face-to-face opportunities for the sellers, for AEs and SDRs then book meetings at those events and so on and so forth. So like, it's about just getting as granular as possible, right? So
Yeah.
and then trying to connect each three of those teams together. So AEs, account list, target in that region. SDRs, account list, personas that we want to go after, surround them with messaging, both on LinkedIn, so in-mails, etc., connecting with people as well as over email and over phone. And then on top of that, marketing from an air cover perspective to make sure that they're giving them opportunities to connect. So whether it's in face-to-face surroundings, webinars, or face-to-face or digital experiences, webinars, ebooks, etc., right? And that's how I do it in the high-ticket SaaS, right? Volume SaaS is a different play, but I'll stop there for just a moment.
I tell you what, I mean, if you are looking to grow your sales, like go back to the last 3 to 4 minutes and just re-listen to that over and over again. This was super tactical, Andy. I love that. And I was like it was rapid fire of exactly what you should do. So, dude, that's awesome. That was really, really cool. And you mentioned in there, you talked about personalized marketing. And so I was curious to know what you meant by that. How can organizations elevate their sales teams through what you've called impactful touch points?
Yeah, so as I said, I work in the SaaS space, and I work so SaaS being tech, right? And I don't know if the primarily the tools that I'm doing marketing or sales for are in the MarTech or sales tech space, right? And in that MarTech space, you may be familiar with a guy called Scott Brinker. I don't know if you know Scott Brinker, but Scott writes he runs a company called Chief Martech, and Chief Martech creates a landscape once a year which shows all of the different tools and technologies that are available in the MarTech. He calls it the MarTech landscape. Now, over the past years, this has grown massively, like in terms of the number of providers out there. So I think he's recognized something this year. I think it's like 30,000 tools, right? That are within the MarTech space, but it's actually more than that if you include sales tech as well, right? And it's very, very rare that you're going to have a tool that's so unique that it's like there's no competitors. Like there's very few of those. And if that's another challenge as well, by the way, because then you probably don't have a product market fit, right? So that's a different challenge altogether, right? So my point being, with those specific crowded categories, I always try to go in and be different to what the competition is doing, right? So the touch points that I'm trying to get in front of customers with or prospects with is essentially more exciting than what my competitors are doing. Let me give you some examples, right? Okay. So I've worked at companies before where when I was a full-time CMO, I was working for a company called Exponia, and Exponia was competing with Salesforce, Adobe, Oracle for that CDP, omni-channel experience platform category, right? And we were competing for upper mid-market, right, which is right where Salesforce Marketing Cloud comes in, right? They go upper mid-market to low-tier enterprise. It's exactly where we were looking to play. That mid-market, mid to upper mid-market space is crowded, full of vendors, right? So you've got point solution vendors that are just offering one specific solution. So, for example, there might be email service providers that would offer just email, and then they maybe offer a couple of other channels. Then you have like X amount of CDPs, so customer data platforms, which then also offer execution channels, and the list goes on, right? So you're talking about very crowded space that's also bullied or ruled by these like enormous cloud platforms that goes back to the adage, like nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. And guess what? IBM was also in that space, right? So they had back then, they had Watson, which we were competing with, right? So I was like, you know what the difference between us and those companies is that we can be super exciting and make people laugh and also be memorable, right? So we created like experiences that were just cool, you know, like, so we did things like competitor takedown campaigns where we went after the bigger cloud platforms. Like our key message was that we were built from the ground up. We were a CDP that was built from the same team that then went and implemented all of the different channels, marketing channels on top, and then all of the analytics was built in-house as well. as opposed to the bigger cloud platforms that were an amalgamation of different tools that were done over a number of different purchases, acquisitions, M&A over the past 10 years, right? Which leaves customers and internally at least people rather disgruntled, right? And the same, it's clunky, right? So we did a play on this whereby I actually bought every single Jenga set that was, Jenga, the game, right?
Yeah.
We bought every Jenga set in the UK, and we created a sleeve that went over the Jenga set that we called it Datanga, which was like making sure that your data blocks don't fall and making sure that stuff is built from the ground up. And then we put a messaging card in with it as well to say, like, don't get caught up with the bigger cloud platforms telling you that things are going to be fine when they're not, definitely not. Make sure you go with a platform that's been built from the ground up so that your tower won't tumble, or your MarTech tower won't tumble, basically, right? And we sent that out to all the major retailers across the UK, and we managed to get it. We managed to get into bed with a couple of them. We managed to close a couple of them then afterwards as well. So it was like those things that we would sit down as a team and think through like once, twice, 3 times a quarter to be like, okay, what can we do that's like different and exciting in comparison to the competition? And we won because of creativity.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I would suggest to do when I'm talking about personalized touch points. They're the things that I would do. Like, it doesn't need to be that big, but like think about creative things that you have fun with, like as a marketer, that you can deliver into accounts that's going to be memorable.
Yeah. And quite frankly, for us, this is the more fun stuff too. Right. And so I love that. That's a cool idea. Okay, final question for you, Andy. What are some mistakes you see organizations making when working to align marketing and sales? Like, where are they making mistakes? Where's the disconnect? I mean, other than just not communicating.
Sure. I think not aligning targets is probably one of the bigger ones. I've mentioned targets already, right? It's like you'd be surprised in terms of organizations that don't have targets, and I think that's just one part of it. But I always, when it comes to targets, I think that marketing should be aligning themselves as best they can to what the overall sales goal target is, right? Because otherwise they're just going to be coming up with stuff that's, let's say, for example, marketing is being based on impressions that they're getting on ad campaigns, right? Or visits to the website. Like, sales don't care about that. Like, that's going to automatically drive them away from one another because it's like, it's too hard to grasp onto. Instead, if marketing is being measured based on the amount of pipeline that's being created across the entire organization, that's definitely going to drive more interest from the seller's perspective to work closer with the marketing team because they're going to help them hit their number.
Yeah.
And that, if you're not helping, if they don't see that, if they can't grasp onto it, right, I'm making sellers sound super simple here, but they are. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. but they can be. But the point is, if it's not something that they can grasp onto, something that's in their world, and they can see, okay, marketing is going to help me hit my number. Therefore, I'm going to work with marketing to make sure that I'm being successful, right? Like, because the most successful sellers think about number one first. They think about themselves first, and that's the mind of the seller. Like, I need to close. That's my number. I'm going to hit my number. Right. So I'd say that's like one of the key things that I've seen is like marketing targets not being aligned to sales targets, which is not just about like which creates like the wrong expectation from sales, and then they just lose interest, right? And at the same time, it's the marketing leader as well needs to be a marketer that has some commercial experience, like revenue experience. Not saying that they have to be a seller, but they need to have been in that model before where they're driving like business outcomes, commercial outcomes from the work that they're doing. And this is something that people underestimate in terms of like when they go and hire a marketer. But like, this is really important. The head of marketing needs to be able to see eye to eye with whoever the head of the sales org is. And you need to be super careful as well that the head of the sales org is not running marketing, because it goes the other way, because you then move away from this like creative process to a much more data-driven process, but it's a data-driven process in the wrong way. So like what I've seen is sales leaders trying to drive marketing teams based on pure numbers. Tell me what's like, let's take, for example, we're talking about a company that has annual contract values or average contract values of 100K per annum. And I've seen chief revenue officers before not being able to argue with CFOs when it comes to things like what's being directly driven from an ad campaign that's doing top of funnel stuff on LinkedIn. Okay, it's not directly driving to the bottom line revenue, so turn it off. And then 6 months later, they're like, oh, we're seeing a drop in pipeline. Why is that? Well, it's because the thing that you had on that's not exactly attributable to revenue, you turned off, right?
Yeah.
So like that's incredibly important as well, right? So don't have a seller running the marketing team.
That is good. Andy, this is really good stuff. I appreciate you taking the time today. Where can people learn more information about you?
Sure. Best place to get me is on LinkedIn. You can get me on andyculligan.com. I'm after launching another project as well called purplepickle.io, which is a go-to-market agency. So just check us out there. But you'll find me Andy Culligan on LinkedIn.
Awesome, Andy. Thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. It's been fun. We'll have to do it again sometime. Okay.
Sure. Sounds good, Kirby. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Well, that's going to wrap up this edition of Delivering Marketing Joy. We'll see you next time.